Pull request.
On LinkedIn? On LinkedIn. Oh, sounds about right. You can take it first.
I'm not sure.
I'll take it first.
What's going on, everybody? We are live with Ruben this morning. Ruben, you're in Tampa, right? You're in Tampa?
St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg. So how does that work? How does that work geography-wise?
Different cities.
I mean, Dan knows that's an interesting question to ask me for sure.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's the Tampa Bay community. We all work together. We're all invested in the same thing. But I mean, there is definitely there is a difference, and there is a small rivalry, I'll say, between the two different cities on everything. You know, I don't want to get too much flack for what I have to say, but I always tell. I do a lot of work with the city of St. Petersburg. I'm the entrepreneur in residence for the city, and so I do a fair amount of recruiting of companies, high scalable ventures, mostly software and technology, to help get those founders and those companies to relocate here. And so here being St. Petersburg specifically, and so a little jab, but I think part of the fun. I always say anything good you've heard about the region is because of St. Petersburg, and anything not so good you've heard is because of Tampa.
This is great. So we just had a bunch of followers stop watching us. So I think you upset them, Ruben. So
I really thought I was doing Tampa. So
yeah, everyone, for those of you who are tuning in, add us comments. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you. We're excited to be with y'all this week. We have a great guest today. We are currently just breaking down the geographical differences between St. Petersburg and Tampa, and it sounds like St. Petersburg is a better city. So if anyone is from St. Petersburg, please let us know. If anyone's from Tampa, please let us know. But again, Ruben, man, thanks for coming on, buddy. We appreciate it. We appreciate it a ton.
Of course.
Ruben, want to get into your story a little bit. So you're originally from St. Pete. You're originally from this area. You went to University of South Florida in St. Petersburg. You got really involved and started businesses young when you were in college. What was it about the Tampa area, the St. Pete area, that kept you in this area? And then ultimately, how did you build your career to where you are now?
Yeah. I've grown up here. And so I think that's a major reason. I do have family here. It is beautiful. I think for a lot of the same reasons that makes it really easy to recruit people here, both for staff, for presence, and for companies to move here, are the exact reasons that I've stayed here. And it's been interesting because I've also seen the growth and the change over time. So I grew up in North County, North Pinellas, the East Lake area. So very, very different, even though only 30, 40 minutes away, just true suburban versus anything like a proper downtown Tampa or downtown St. Petersburg. And so when I moved to St. Petersburg, which was for USF St. Pete, there was no beach drive. Central was boarded up. You couldn't recognize it. I think there were maybe one or two tall buildings over 10, 20 stories, obviously night and day now. And so it's been really cool to be a part of and really see the growth and change of new restaurants opening every single week, all the breweries, thousands of artists, tons of software and entrepreneurs and new business owners. And St. Petersburg specifically, the mom and pop, the community feel, the investment in each other. And I think that last part is the primary reason. It's the fact that this is a community that loves itself, and the people here want to see everybody else succeed and be a part of that growth. And so that's been huge. I also like being someone kind of on the forefront versus just fitting in with everything else. So very easily, like many of my peers did years ago, could have gone to San Francisco or could have gone to New York or some of the big tech, capitals, or Boston for education technology, for example. But the reality is there's thousands, tens of thousands. So you're so much more competition. They're already mature places. And so being a part of that growth and change here has been really cool. That's probably the primary driver and reason here.
Awesome. Well, for those of you who are tuning in, we have an amazing individual today. I have some comments too. Our boy Danny Thompson's tuning in with us. Been to Tampa, been to St. Pete. Had a great time in both. I love it. And then Kathia, hello as always. So for those of you tuning in, thank you for tuning in to Unicorn Finders. We are excited to have our new friend and part of the podcast, Ruben, today. Before we dive in again, the reason why Unicorn Finders was started about a year ago because both Jake, Dan, and I are dear friends, and we were very lonely, sitting at home, very lonely. And so we decided to hang out. And a year later, we've had some pretty amazing guests. And so for those of you tuning in, we're excited to talk about EdTech today, talk about Ruben's company, Presence. So without further ado, Ruben, man, let's go ahead and dive into who you are. Give the people what they want, a little peel behind the onion of who Ruben is and kind of what you do now. And then we'll go ahead and dive into the conversation today.
Sure. I mean, that's a big question, I guess. I don't even know. I guess I always start when I was around 10, mostly because that's when I started programming. And I got connected to technology and a little bit of business and stuff as well. I was very fortunate enough to grow up with 2 independent business owners as parents. So if you look up all the reasons people become entrepreneurs, that's like one of the leading is they were nurtured into that and their family has been used to that. And so you end up being a whole lot less risk adverse. So that's a major, I think reason of where I got to where I am now. But when I was 10, I walked into my dad's home office and said, how do I build a website? And he said, I don't know, leave me alone. And so I think it was more, I don't know, go figure it out. And so I did. I researched it myself. I'm completely self-taught. And so I've always had a technology background and have really enjoyed how software and technology in general can be a solution that can be put in place and run itself and do its thing. And so coupling that with my compulsion to problem solve, if something's broken, I have a hard time not being the person to fix it. And if something's not broken, I have a hard time not breaking it. And so all of that together results in, a whole lot of good and a whole lot of interesting habits that come along with it. But I've built a ton of products and companies in the past. Presence, what I'm focusing on now is really what I spend 110% of my time on every single day. With my team, we have about 40 employees that work on Presence now today. And Presence really through my experience in my undergrad first. I went to the University of South Florida and got super involved on campus and ended up, as I'm sure you all did and others that are listening, learning a whole lot more outside of the classroom than I did in the classroom. And so that experiential learning opportunities that I was given and the more applicable skills to everyday life and whatever, kind of grew a passion in me to make sure other students were achieving that and getting into that and being a part of that. Because we really only saw the same 5 to 10% of students coming out to events and opportunities on campus that existed. And so I ended up getting involved in student government. Most people don't realize student governments allocate millions of dollars every year, as much as $30 million a year at some institutions. Yeah, with full autonomy and authority. Now, granted, within certain guidelines.
Do you spend more just because it says government, just like the normal government? Is that how that budget works?
It's interesting because, it is looked at as tax dollars, very similar because it's tuition. So the student government's budget is a portion of students' tuition. So when it's interesting because a lot of, bloat in government comes from, well, we got to make sure we're spending the money right and doing the right things. And so there is a fair amount of hey, let's spend some money to make sure that, we're going to spend the rest right and make sure we know what we're doing. And so, I don't think it's nearly to the extreme, but it is very similar. The student governments, although working on much lower importance than the real government, work just the same way. There's an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch, and they all have their functions and they all have their arguments and their compromises and everything else. And so it was a good experience, of course. It's an incredible learning experience, but it introduced new problems. To your point, we basically have brand new college students and learning college students as they're progressing, deciding how to allocate millions of dollars every year. And so there was no reason or rhyme or why, how that was being done. And everyone had their reasons, but there was no standard or structure to it. And what I really mean is there was no data behind it. And so that was the kind of second major pain point. 1, we were only reaching so many students. 2, we were trying to allocate millions of dollars every year without any data. And then I ended up working on the staff side. So I actually worked in enrollment and marketing and student affairs as a professional staff member at the institution as well, and got deeper into things like retention and graduation rates. Really the key metrics that higher ed cares about. Are we getting students to convert year to year, and are they actually graduating? and they make more money that way. And they also get more tuition and get back some of their cost of recruitment. And so student involvement, among other factors like academics and financial and psychological, play large roles in whether students make it through graduation and are bought into the campus or don't transfer. And so what Presence really was when we built it was, let's make it easy to start collecting data around student involvement on campus, make it easy to understand, and then give administrators and staff access to take action on improving student engagement, success, and now workforce readiness.
Was this something that wasn't like people weren't doing this, or was this like manual Excel process, or just kind of gut checking before, and you have a platform that automates a lot of that or makes it easier? What was the process like before, and have you fixed it?
Yeah, honestly, when we started this, institutions that were trying to do something were using everything from clickers to spreadsheets to, well, I order 8 boxes of pizza, each with 8 slices. And when I know the pizza's gone because each student took a slice, we had 64 people come out, and that's good. And so those were honestly what they were stuck having to do. And so, we just made that really easy. And now it's a giant, enterprise platform. We have about 250 universities and colleges across North America that use the application with well over 1.5 million students.
Awesome, man.
You obviously haven't invited me to
congratulations.
any pizza parties yet. I'll eat
Thank
all
you.
64 pizzas.
Yeah, I'm like a 4 slice.
I said, yeah, you haven't invited me to any of those parties because I'll eat all 64 pieces, and just one person came.
We're super involved.
Totally skew the data. Totally skew it.
Hey, Ruben, talk just a little bit. You mentioned collecting data about student involvement, and then hopefully connect that to retention and other things. But what else, or what are you finding with that data? Or what's interesting, pieces of information that universities are learning about their students?
Yeah, I'd say, and to give you more context, so we get. Not only are we tracking everything that students are doing outside of the classroom, but we mix that with student information system data. And so that kind of data points include things like age and gender and race and major and class and ethnicity and GPA and location. It's like a couple hundred different data points that we get about students.
Wow.
That gets mixed and mingled with the tracking data to provide the in-depth analytics and assessment that the professionals of the institution need. And it's really interesting because I don't remember, it's been a while, but the exact percentage, it's well over 95% of students actually want their data used this way to improve their college experience. And so everyone's bought into doing things like this during college. And so one of my favorites, Dan, is Valdosta State University in Georgia. The vice president of student affairs there, Vince Miller, calls it his magic number. And what they've done is they've used our software to find the exact amount of engagements that a first year or freshman student needs to effectively guarantee they're going to retain to their sophomore year. And so for Valdosta, it was 10, and it was a 95% rate. So if we could get students to engage in 10 things during their first year, they know they'll have a 95% rate in retaining. And if it was 12, it bumps it up to like 98% or something like that. So now Valdosta has built an entire dashboard and incentive portal to interest students and incentivize them to hit a score and gamify that with us, in which point they'll earn a scholarship once they hit that numbers as well. So it's been really cool to see some of the effects that this has had.
I'm not saying this tongue in cheek, but are you tracking like mixers and parties and stuff as part of those events, or are these specifically like university driven and sponsored events?
If it's a like, it definitely has to be like school related, but if a student club, so it's not like a random party, but if a student club is hosting a meeting or a mixer or anything, and in many cases, alcohol may be allowed at things like that, right? But it's still sponsored by the institution. That's what gets tracked. And so, but likewise, at a lot of institutions, Greek life parties, despite being exclusive, are technically approved by an institution and have to meet certain guidelines. And so they actually typically, at least in my experience and a little bit beyond, those organizations also have to know who's coming into those parties from a risk management and a safety perspective, as well as knowing age. And so they'll use us to track those types of things as well. It'll be private, so other students won't be able to see it, of course. But theoretically, even at events like that, we would know that they're there as well.
So, Ruben, have you guys noticed a difference or talked to your, clients, your colleges and universities about what the difference in maybe retention rates were before they started tracking it this way, and maybe where they went over the next few years? Did they see a pretty drastic improvement?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very tough direct causation. We can show plenty of correlation. We can show in cases like Valdosta and many others that there is causation, but tying a directly proportionate causation to just what we're doing is pretty much impossible. And that goes for any type of stats, because the reality is there's hundreds of data points and reasons why. The four primary I mentioned earlier: academics, financial, psychological, and then student involvement, where we come in. And so looking at those things are interesting. I still point to Valdosta. Personally done a lot of work with Dr. It's top of mind for me. But they specifically looked at 5 different data points and found the data week that they collect with us is the second largest driver, second only to academic performance at their institution. And so they are seeing that. We have institutions that we have tracked that have increased as much as, I know one went from like 50 to 58% in, I think it was a single year, a couple years into using us in their graduation rates. We have others that I know there's one that's a more transient student population. So they'll come take a few classes, go back to work, take a few classes another semester. And so their graduation rate was something like 29%, and we got that to 32% in a single year. And so we've seen some significant increases. Again, there's all kinds of data that can also play in on that, but we like to feel, and I think the institutions do believe, that what they're doing with us does make a significant impact in that increase as well.
Yeah. How is it that you guys are using this for future recruiting of students as well? Or are the universities using that, hey, by the way, we have this many events and this is our, graduation rate based on these, and or how do you tie into, here's a diversity within these paths, but how do we, grow that and things like that? Are they using that for pre-recruitment?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're actually going both ways. So when you initially said recruiting, I was thinking on the workforce side. So I'll actually both. So on the new student recruitment side, part of our application is what powers all of the marketing channels, all the engagement tools that we provide. So we actually power a mobile app, a web portal, and digital signage all over. And so that students know exactly where to go to find out how to get involved and what opportunities there are. So one of the bigger selling points of Presence is that we don't require anyone to log in to be able to know what's going on at the institution, just like you wouldn't have to for a normal website or an app. And so in that enrollment gets the benefit of being able to show off what student life looks like and what opportunities are going on to prospective students. Second, I don't know myself of any institutions that are doing this. I know it was part of conversations when they were buying, but being able to utilize the data to understand what types of students end up being more involved, or what types of students need something to get more involved, so get them early during the prospect stage to make sure they'll be involved and successful throughout their college career. And then the other part I was talking about on the workforce side is part of our application actually allows institutions to create learning outcomes and the soft and essential skill sets that students can learn and earn by getting involved, similar to those applicable skills I felt I was earning. So the app allows there to be a true structure around what those skills are. They can group them into competencies, and they can actually measure the levels and depth those skills are earned, and then help students understand how to earn those skills. And so they can create what are called learning pathways, which are essentially like gamified, choose your own milestones and requirements that students can do to have a more holistic experiential learning, at campus, and earn the levels and depth of those skills, which then come together in what we call is a smart transcript, which is essentially a digital interactive profile a student could share with an employer to show off everything they've done and the skills they earned while they were at school. And so that helps on the other side of recruitment and helping students land better line.
That's cool. How do you guys intersect? Is that the extent that you intersect with the Career Center and the career involvement, career track? Or is there some sort of like insights that come into like, hey, this person keeps gravitating towards these type of events. Maybe they should be towards this career or whatever, because then you have you get that so many times people graduate and they don't know, all right, now what, right? Unless you're specialized, all the art history majors don't know what the hell they want to do, right? So like, what are you going to do with that, right? So is there any way of like coaching that they can leverage that data?
Yeah, definitely. And I believe they do. Again, we don't necessarily get deep into those types of conversations or knowledge that's,
Sure.
How often that's happening. But in my experience, the Career Center leaders that I've had conversations with are absolutely doing that. And so they'll similar to kind of how an academic advisor may look at your transcript and the courses you've taken or try to understand what you like and help you position yourself for a certain major. A Career Center could absolutely go in and see and say, oh, wow, you're super into this marketing agency organization that you're a part of and this advertising group, and you've gone to all these events and it seems like you like this. Have you considered a major in PR? And, do you know what that whole industry looks like from a perspective? So you can definitely look at it from a data perspective. The second is that part of our experiential learning builder would allow them to build what are normally known as a career readiness program. So almost every institution has a career readiness program where they put you through things like resume building workshops, mock interviews, all kinds of different things that are available that what really most students don't even realize exist. And so they can actually build that out as a pathway in presence and help students know that it's there and earn credit and incentives and other things to go through that pathway to get their career readiness skills and everything as well.
And Ruben, I want to ask you a follow-up question to that. And I think you may have touched on it. If not, I know you and I have talked about it offline. Is there ways for companies when they're going into recruit out of colleges? We'll just use, the University of Florida, for example, just a random example here. If I'm a company, I go to University of Florida, is there a way, if there's a career fair coming, where I can reach out and if they're using presence that I can say, hey, I want students that are involved in these types of clubs or activities. I want, students that have, participated in this number of activities, this year. Is there any way that you can use that data to target students when companies are coming in?
An institution would be able to do that if they wanted to. I mean, an institution could, that's the whole application is, give me students that have done these things or have gotten this involved or are, interested in these types of things. So very easily an institution could do that on their own for sure. We don't necessarily have a way for that company to come in and to our application and do that at all, of course. But, the data's there. The institution could absolutely decide to do that. All kind of to Jake's initial question. We actually can also house internship opportunities, on-campus job opportunities, civic engagement or volunteering opportunities can all be cataloged and hosted in presence as well.
That's awesome. And so being in the EdTech space, there's e-learning, there's all sorts of stuff that goes on. Are you involved, or how involved are you in some sort, the community of EdTech, and what has been some of the exciting disruptors, aside from presence, of course, that you see coming down the pipe, or any other founders or companies you're like, wow, okay, that was a cool solution to a problem that we had been seeing? Because we had on Next Play, Kyle Muma from Next Play a few months ago, and he was noticing that there was no support for student athletes for their actual education. they were getting much more, hey, you're a gladiator, and if you're hurt and your scholarship's done, and you don't go pro, then well, thanks. Here's partial of a degree, right? So he helped, build a platform to make sure that doesn't happen to student athletes, right? So we probably should actually introduce you guys.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think what else is out there. Company that is NAC, and I have a really elegant solution to things like tutoring. I've heard of them before. And I know they've done really well since COVID because they enable a lot of virtual tutoring. But NAC came up with a solution of, I think of a good analogy, but essentially they're like.
Do you know NAC's in Tampa?
What's that? Yeah, NAC. I know in Tampa.
It's not St. Pete.
Yeah, but secretly they want to be in St. Pete. It's okay. So just like that. And so NAC offers almost like an Uber for tutoring. So essentially, cool. And what's unique to what they do is that they hook you up with a tutor that's taken the class you're taking with the professor that you're taking and give you specific help to succeeding in that particular course. And so you can basically, find tutors and book them through NAC from your institution that just succeeded in that course. And it opens up and it kind of democratizes who can be a tutor versus just the tutoring center at the institution. And so that's how they started. And I know they've done some work towards partnering directly with institutions. Dan, I think their largest deal right now is with EdTech, actually.
Yeah, it is.
And so UF and other institutions similar are actually now buying into and subsidizing the tutoring for those students so that honestly, I think they're looking to replace their tutoring centers to just use this as well. So that's definitely one. Cool. Off the top of my head, who else is doing something cool? Well, let's go on. I'll see if I come up with anything else in the meantime.
Yeah.
We'll drop it on something else. Yeah.
Ruben, I want to touch you a little bit. I mean, just briefly, just about scaling, especially with tech. We're more tech focused than probably anything. When you started Presence, money was very different to what you have now. Technology was different 9 years ago. How did you guys decide what technology to start with, and then how have you decided to mold and change over the years? And what are things that you look for as you guys evolve when it comes to tech?
Yeah. Resources are low, right? Just like you said in the very beginning. So it really comes down to what's the most accessible, which comes down to what do you know and the people that you're involved with, what do you already know, right? And so like what's going to get you to that MVP or that first product you can start getting feedback on and get out there to see if it's work or not. And so for us, it was US, for example. It was nothing crazy from a JavaScript library perspective. It was like, what is the bare bones, quickest but still quality way of getting out that initial product. And then once we had that initial traction, at some point it was now, I think it's like 5 years ago now or so, we decided, hey, we've gotten to a point, I don't remember, it was probably, I want to say it was probably 20 to 25, maybe 30 institutions that were using the application. And we basically said, all right, we're going to free and we're going to start over. And it was gotten to a point where we just started adding and adding and adding and adding and adding, where it became, unscalable. I got to a point where, I was working with my CTO and he's like, hey, you want to build this stuff. We can either build this stuff in the existing platform in 9 months, or we can rebuild the whole thing and build this stuff in 6 months. And of course, it didn't necessarily work out that way, but that's what we did. So we said, all right, now that we know what we know, we've gotten all of our feedback, all of our information. We know how people are starting to use it. We have an idea of what we want to build over the next few years. Let's go ahead and build the true system that we want to be building on. And so we actually moved over to Azure. Part of that is because the CTO at the time was all on Microsoft Stack. And we were previously .NET as well and Microsoft as well, but we wanted to be fully in. We also had raised money from 500 startups. And so they actually had an awesome partnership at the time that gave us $360,000 of free credit on Azure. And so it made it obvious to go into using that. And that's totally. And that's credit that's good for 3 years. And so we basically went all in on that. We started building on .NET Core, which was at the time brand new. We started with Angular, which at the time was fairly new. And we've just continued to, build and continue to upgrade and do what we need on that system. And it's gotten us as far as we have now.
Wow.
I love it, man.
So what is we got a couple minutes left before we're wrapping up here. Let's see, do we want to go with startup advice or do we want to go with EdTech advice?
Ruben, I want to ask you a little bit about your role because we didn't get to touch much upon it. But you're the entrepreneur in residence for the city of St. Pete. Touch us a little bit about that role. I know you touched on helping bring businesses in, but what is that role? What do you do?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, sure.
And how can I become that?
What would you say you do here?
What would you say you do here? So, like I said, I spend about 110% of my time on presence. So the extra, say 5 to 10% max on the entrepreneur in resident role. And so essentially what that is, an EIR started, as far as I know, started in venture capital. And it was the idea that firms provide someone that's done it before or is currently doing it as a key resource to the investments and the founders that they're making investments in. And so it was like, hey, we're finance guys or we're PE people and we know how to make these investments, but we also have someone that works with us that's done it before and knows what they're doing as a resource for you. And so institutions, universities and colleges, actually, I had those types of roles to student entrepreneurs and be that resource for students trying to create ventures. And then we started seeing some cities starting to do this. I mean, municipalities and different organizations starting to say, hey, we want to help support entrepreneurs in the city. And so I actually had started long before the role was created, working more closely with economic development and the city of St. Pete in doing recruitings. I don't know if you've heard of PandaDoc, for example, was one of the larger ones a few years ago that I was had my hands in pretty heavily in getting to move here from San Francisco. And now I'm pretty sure this is still a bigger office than their office. And so things like that kind of started teeing off a role like this. And essentially what ended up happening was some of the mayor's people and himself and I got together and basically said, hey, why don't we formalize something here? One, to make it easier for people looking at the city or starting in the city to find me as a resource. Being up here and I've built a strong network here, valuable, and I do want to share that with other people. And it's part of the reason, why I've stayed here as well and why I have an interest here is because people help me, and that's how the community grows in the first place. And so there's three parts of my role. One is helping, assisting, and advocating for the entrepreneurs in the city of St. Petersburg towards for whatever they need, connecting them to the rest of my or others' network, maybe even investors and funders, all kinds of different things. The second, actually helping and recruiting companies to move to the city. And continuing to do that. So pre-COVID, we were actually traveling around a year to big conferences or some stuff as a group, and we would actually crash those conferences, those founders that St. Pete's a better place to move to. And then post-COVID, it's been working more directly with the EDC to take the leads that they've gotten together and the companies that have contacted them and are interested, and just sitting down one-on-one with those founders and helping them understand the pros and cons to St. Here. And then the last piece, the third piece, is actually helping the city itself be more entrepreneurial and think about why startups are able to move so fast and the processes that they have and the simplicity of things that, to your point, with bloat and government, simplify some of that to work more like a startup. So that's what that role looks like. It's a 2-year term. We're a little bit over that. I think we're trying to solidify up some of what the role formally is and create some structure and plan around it as the mayor terms out this year as well, so we can set it up for the next person to come in.
So fun. We've got something like that here in Raleigh. And actually we ended up hiring the person who started it 10 years ago, Derek Miner, to join Vaco internally, who's just an awesome human. Don't tell him
we're working on trying to hire Ruben, but he's got his salary is a little bit higher than we're used to paying.
Yeah, pay nothing. It's for out of the goodness of your heart. Right?
Well, Ruben, why don't just as we wrap up here, where can people learn more about you and Presence, and then we'll wrap up and follow you on social media? And stuff, you know?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not many places to learn about me these days. I've created social media. I still have the accounts just so I can hit them if I really need to. But Jake was giving me shit earlier for not accepting his request, which I haven't even seen yet because I don't really go on much anymore. And so unfortunately, I don't put many updates out there. I do like this. So, I mean, honestly, I found myself to have a pretty unique name, and you can find a lot of podcasts and talks and conversations and things that I've done if you just search my full name. Presence is easy. We have a great marketing team that keeps everybody updated on what we're doing. So Presence is easy to follow through social, our website, any news that we're putting out. But yeah, that's the gist. Honestly, I used to have a whole personal website and everything, but I've just, minimized all of that down to stay focused.
Yeah. Dude, I love it, man. You're one of my favorite people. You've always been one of my favorites. We met probably 6.5 years ago. I had not been in Tampa very long. And Ruben had a small company. He had a guy that we were mutual friends with, and he said, hey, there's a guy that I want you to meet. And the company was called Check I'm Here. 6 years later, he's got an awesome company. He's growing like crazy. And I'm super excited to see what he's doing, man. He's become a really good friend and obviously a huge advocate, for the St. Pete area. So we're happy to have him in our community.
Yeah, Dan.
Turn down St. Pete. Do you throw him over the fence to Tampa? Is that how that works?
Yeah, right into the water. Make me swim back. It's like Alcatraz.
Ruben,
it was
thanks
great.
for coming.
That's what the fairies there for. What's that?
Say that one more time, Ruben. You broke up.
That's really what the fairy's there for. If
That's right.
if they're not right for the same fairy, for sure. Yeah.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, we'll wrap up, man. Thank you so much for coming on this week, especially on somewhat short notice. And we're looking forward, and I'm rooting for you. Obviously, and I sent you a text the other day you never responded to, so I'll wait for that response after you respond to Jake's LinkedIn message.
Perfect. End scene.
I love it. Thanks, Ruben.
See you.